Hi, this is Howard Innes. I've just got back from a weekend in Llandudno in North Wales attending the Herpetofauna Workers Meeting. As usual, this meeting was a fantastic collaborative environment, and it was great to get together with all of the delegates, which included ARC and ARG members, landowners and managers, those engaged in research, and of course a consultant community. And as ever, there was a lot of interaction between all of those groups, which was great to see. Whilst I was there, I took the opportunity to interview some of the presenters, particularly, but also some of the people that have been coming to this event for many years and some that were attending this year for the first time. I hope these interviews inspire you to look out for the invitation for the next Herpetofaunas meeting, which will appear on our website round about the end of 2023. So please look out for that and look forward to seeing you next year. So I'm with Tony Gent, CEO of Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. Tony, what were your observations on day one of the Herp Workers Meeting 2023?
Well, as someone has remarked, it's very much like coming back out of hibernation. And it's really great to do that. We've suddenly seen faces we haven't seen for years, all slightly greyer, I hasten to add, but nonetheless no less enthusiastic. So it's really good stuff. And a great day, really good.
Yeah, there's been a great deal of enthusiasm, and there's been some fantastic presentations today. I was very, very impressed by some of the speakers.
Yeah, it's not only the quality, but also the diversity of talks. We've covered everything from genetics right the way through radio tracking, legislation, the works, and it's been great. And they've all been good talks, really good.
Yeah, they have been good talks. So what are your sort of feelings about where we're at in the sort of world of amphibian and reptile conservation? I think, what Jim was saying about the legislation was important, because that, to an extent, creates a framework for what we do. And it was good to see some of the initiatives in Wales that are going on with Nature and Bith. But what are your thoughts about what it means for the future and how we move forward?
Well, I think the thing that Jim really highlights is the risk that can be brought by politicians, the extremes of it being really good one day to really bad the next, and this is at the really high level. Although we're able to do lots of stuff at grassroots, we're able to do research, we get the people enthused, and there's a massive travel in the right direction there. It doesn't take much for that all to be put on the scary list, let's put it that way, because you don't need much from a politician or from a whole government department to make things that are once very secure become very insecure.
That's a good point. Yeah, so that's the environment we work in. So, favourite presentation today? If you had to choose, that's unfair, I guess. But
I think I'll give it to Tarek for a couple of reasons. One is because it was good fun and it was good. But if I could stand up and do that in English, let alone in Dutch, to give a presentation of that quality in a second language,
that's good.
Something I'd really aspire to do.
Tarek's presentation about the involvement of volunteers in building artificial breeding sites for grass snakes.
And the whole history about how they where they came from, the great relationship with man in terms of the habitats, the grass snake heavens that used to be the old farmsteads, going through to where we are today. We've actually got to go back to make those connections again to keep them in a much more open landscape.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was an inspiring talk, but they've all been good.
Yeah, and I don't want to play anyone else down from having chosen a favourite.
No, not at all. I think there's some good presentations. We've got another day tomorrow, and perhaps we'll chat at the end of the day tomorrow and see where we end up.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Right, I'm with Ben Owens, and Ben, this morning your talk was on the sand lizards that have been found in Wales, and you were looking particularly at some of the populations that have been found quite recently in Wales, and you talked about the genetics to determine that they were actually the genetic origin of those animals was the dune lizards from Merseyside. The question I was interested in was that there is a population in Harlech that's been there for probably about 15 generations now, and I just wondered whether that was enough time to be able to test against the genome for those Harlech animals to see whether they could have been the source for the introductions that you've discovered in other parts of Wales.
Yeah. So I think it probably isn't quite enough generations now to be like its own complete entity. I think it definitely would eventually get there, like as any kind of contained population would eventually evolve to be its own thing. And if we really kind of stretch out our methods and make it very fine scale, you will start to see those populations becoming like their own entities. So when you see the map, you could start to see some of the clades almost of those populations within that larger whales population, or that larger whales clade. We do see it in like the Gower where it kind of starts and separate off, and it might indicate a more recent introduction from these like captive genotypes and being released.
So really the conclusion that we can come to is that we know what the original source was, but we can't determine whether perhaps Harlech was a stepping stone for animals to be taken and moved to some of the other sites.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment it looks more like it is those like Sefton or Merseyside animals which have kind of been taken individually, and then nothing's been taken from Harlech and moved. It's just stayed in Harlech. I think we would actually see it if that had happened, but yeah, I think over time that kind of thing will become a lot more clear. I think it took quite a lot more generations, but you do start to see those clades starting to form, and those like admixtures really being stretched out. You have to really force the analysis to do it. But,
so given a bit of time, we might be able to
possibly
get to different conclusions.
Yeah.
But no, it's a fascinating talk, and thank you very much. And it's interesting to see sand lizards in other parts of Wales.
It is, yeah. It's really, really cool to see them there. I'm just glad they're here. You know, they don't extinct. And
they're an iconic species. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ben.
No worries, thank you.
Okay, I'm with Tarek Stark, and Tarek, you said something that really relates to me. You said the grass snake is the greatest snake on Earth.
It is the greatest snake on Earth.
I have to agree.
Yes, and it just so happens to occur both in the Netherlands and the UK, so we have that in common.
Yeah, we're very lucky, and it is a fantastic snake. So your presentation was all about the fact that throughout parts of the Netherlands, you've got teams of volunteers that are going out creating artificial egg-laying sites for the snakes.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is just such an obvious thing to do. So how long have your volunteers been building those egg-laying sites?
Well, some of the groups have been active since the late 80s, early 90s. And some are really quite new, like this year. But you have really old ones, and especially in the west of the country, like near Amsterdam and Utrecht, because you have, contrary to belief, really big grass snake populations there, and people quite like them nowadays.
That's great.
Yeah.
And those groups, are they conservation groups who are doing other things, or are they kind of focused on building the egg-laying sites?
It's a mixed bag, really. So near Amsterdam, there was the founder of the reptile monitoring program in the Netherlands, Annie Zuiderwijk, Ingo Janssen, Gerard Smit. And they saw that grass snakes, the egg-laying sites were declining.
Yeah.
So they got in touch with municipalities, with the council, and got all these people together to specifically build these heaps.
Yeah.
And the council plays a big part because they have all the equipment, like rakes and all the leaves and weeds. So and then Ingo and Annie, they got together all these people like, we can do this, we can work together. So it's our NGO, Rayvon, the council, and all the volunteers. It's a happy little marriage.
That's brilliant.
And it works perfectly.
It's just such a sort of straightforward, simple thing to do, and it's sort of the sort of thing that existing volunteer groups could be motivated to do as well.
Absolutely, and it's such an important difference because I call them breeding heap working groups, grass snake heap working groups, and some of these groups say, no, Tarek, we're a group that works with these heaps. We're not a heap working group.
Right.
So semantics really play into it because a lot of these guys do all kinds of chores, restoring ponds, maintaining hedgerows, and twice a year they do the breeding heaps.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I just wanted to ask quickly was that you've managed to obtain the statistics about the number of successful egg hatching and the hatch rate. Just to check, do you do that by dismantling the heaps at the end of the year and looking for the spent egg cases, as it were?
That's right. Because of the environmental legislation, you're not allowed to build a heap containing dung, horse dung, larger than 3 cubic meters. Otherwise, legislation impinges on it.
Right.
Because it's fairly small, these heaps, you have to turn them over, renew them every year, because otherwise they lose their effect.
Yeah.
But that gives you the added benefit of monitoring the success rate, actually. So you have to turn them over anyway, otherwise they lose their effect.
Yeah.
So then you can get the spent X cases,
And you can count the
and you
success.
can count them per heap.
Do you know what? I just hope that your presentation today changes the future for what I agree with you is the world's greatest snake in the UK, because it is such a simple thing that we could do. And the fact that you've been managing to extend populations and encourage them into areas that perhaps they weren't in just by providing egg-laying sites, tremendous.
And we've been doing this for this species for millennia, because we're a messy species, humans.
Sure.
So every farm just had one of these heaps, or maybe multiple heaps.
Yeah.
So we've been providing this service for them for a long, long time. And in the past 50 to 70 years, we kind of lost that in Western Europe.
Yeah.
And now we, as groups, as citizens, we can fill in that gap and give a little bit back to the grass snake.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thanks for the interview.
No problem.
It's inspiring. So yeah, the future is bright.
It surely is.
Yeah. Thank you, Tarek.
Thank you.
One day, 52 is the highest ever. 52.
Where?
Perfect.
Where can I find this?
Well, we'll stick. So I'm with Becky Turner. Now, Becky, you've had a starring role at this Herp Workers meeting because you've run 2 workshops and you've also done a presentation. So that's actually quite a lot for your first Herp Workers meeting as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I did sign up to quite a bit.
You
from
did.
The off, yes.
You did. Let's just talk about the presentation, because what you were looking at was the ecological traps, the meteorological traps, if you like, that adders can
The
find
climate
themselves.
traps.
Climate traps that adders can find themselves in. And I guess like any study like that, so you were specifically looking at the adder's exposure to frost in the populations that you looked at in Cornwall, and what impact that had. Like all those sort of studies, they seem to actually generate more questions than answers, and there were a couple of questions at the end of it. So if you were able to continue that, what do you think the key questions that you would focus on to answer? Because you've obviously had time to think through, the results of your research.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd want to do some ground truthing. So
Right.
actually go out and find out, are adders experiencing climate traps?
Yeah.
Are they experiencing increased frost exposure or suboptimal conditions when they emerge from their hibernation? Try to understand the temperature cues that they are actually using to emerge from the hibernation, I think is a really important starting point. At the start of my talk, I mentioned there were lots of different theories about what drives adder emergence, and the reality is it's probably a combination of several cues.
Because you had about, was it 6 cues that you looked at, or you were considering? Was it more than that?
About 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But that was just temperature. I mean, there's some debate about whether temperature is the main cue up to a point, and then eventually light takes over. And
That's a good point. Day length and things like that.
Day length and things like that. Prey availability, So ideally, I'd like to go back to basics, try and examine some of these cues.
And of course, you don't know what's happening inside the animal as well, because there could be hormonal clues and that sort of stuff going on.
Exactly. So whether being exposed to prolonged periods of kind of sub-zero temperature, what impact does that have on the adder's biology, on the adder's ecology? And especially if we think of this in combination of like warmer overwintering temperatures. So adders, there's been some papers out saying that adders are actually hibernating at a slightly warmer temperature than they did many, many years ago. And that means they're emerging with poorer body condition because their systems don't fully shut down like they should do, kind of into this intermediate hibernation state. So they're racing through their body fat stores. So when they come out, they've got worse body condition, they're slower, they can't escape predators. Combine that with an overexposure of really cold, frosty conditions. Overall, the adder's health is probably deteriorating, but we don't have hard and fast evidence about that yet. So that would be really interesting to find out.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're faced with a situation where the data suggests that the adders are declining, and that could be one of the reasons behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing to consider. It's interesting though, because some of the other presentations also suggested that hibernation, as we've always traditionally understood it as well, is not necessarily what actually happens. Because there are other presentations this morning which looked at common frogs, which demonstrated that activity happens throughout the year.
Yeah.
And even if talking to observers of adders, there's many adder observers who've seen adders in every month of the year. So maybe it's just, as you say, is understanding those cues and finding out, proving which ones are the key cues that bring you out of hibernation.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's been coming out more so recently that we are seeing adders in every month of the year.
Yeah.
For how long that's been happening, I don't know. Maybe people are just documenting it better now.
Yeah, that's it.
There's another aspect.
Because people wouldn't have been out necessarily recording that, but just from casual observations, I've seen adders in every month of the year.
Oh, wow.
Ever since I've been going out looking for adders. So, it's not an unprecedented event. You see what I mean? But it could be happening more. Your presentation was excellent, but you also ran 2 excellent workshops. Any key takeaways? So your workshops were looking at the plethora of different data recording applications, which is part of your PhD.
Yep.
And anything new that came from those workshops, do you think? Or
I think it was just really encouraging that everyone was on the same page. Everyone understood that we're in this situation now where technology is rife.
Yeah.
We've got lots of different options about where we send our data, and everyone wants to send it to the right place where their data will be most usable, but there's some confusion about which platform that is, what happens to their data after they submit that information, and also some just kind of they want to make sure that their data is used in good contexts and not in potentially negative contexts. So it's really interesting, and people were very engaged, and I'm very appreciative of everyone taking part.
That's something that we can't afford to let go of, because the data is what feeds this industry, and if we don't get that right, and we don't get an environment where we can actually share in that network of data and share it effectively with all the right metadata, we're never going to be able to develop effective conservation strategies, I don't think. So
it's just about understanding how that data has been generated in the first place. Looking at the back end of things, when you come to analyse that data, it becomes so much more usable. Just knowing what procedures were undertaken to generate that data in the first place. Even if it was for a different context, so you were asking a different question in the first place, that's fine. We can model that now thanks to statistical innovation.
Exactly.
So,
And very, very final question. In a couple of seconds, what are your thoughts about the Herp Workers Meeting, your first one?
Oh yeah, it's my first one. It's so much fun. Yeah, absolutely. I hope to come back. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will. All right. Thank you very much, Becky.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. I'm with Mandy Cartwright, who is our North Wales officer for Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. Mandy, great presentation today. Really enjoyed that. So that was our update on the status of natterjacks and Liam-did sand lizards in North Wales. And the projects that you talked about have been running for getting on nearly 20 years now, I guess, some of them. It feels that you make a good progress, but does it feel to you that how far into it do you think you are? Because it feels like we're making a good start, but we're still kind of halfway through getting the species established back in North Wales.
Yeah.
For natterjacks, I mean.
For natterjacks in particular. So I kind of joined the natterjack project in about 2010. So I came in 15 years later and was kind of focused on the management of the site, looking after the site, getting to know the species and what they actually required. And then when I moved into ARG, kind of came to a more kind of a guidance and supporting the land managers with other staff, other colleagues within ARG. But I do feel a little bit frustrated at the speed it's moving.
Is that due to the animal, do you think, or is it due to the kind of organisational challenges of getting these animals established? Because there's a lot to do, isn't there, to get animals back on site?
Yeah, there's a tremendous lot to do, and it's not just ARC itself, it's the
absolutely.
regulating bodies. Like we've hit a few kind of issues with a sand lizard site we're looking at the moment. So it's also, I think we need to go back and assess those sites and the habitats since it's 2007. Quite a lot's happened since then. I do think looking forward, and we need to kind of re-look at all the sites that potentially could support natterjack toad populations, maybe a little bit of modelling, reassess, and then moving forward. But yeah, my worry is we've got tilapia pretty well established, and the numbers are going down slightly. Is we don't want to have any kind of detriment by using tilapia as a donor site. If we're using those, we don't want to kind of compromise that site, because the good work's being done there. Pretty much through the site, there's breeding, ongoing management, enthusiasm. We have got one site established, and we're working on this third site now, which it feels like it's slowly going in the right direction, but I do feel like we need a bit of a fresh kind of look at the direction of where we're actually going from now, really. What availability, how many tadpole spawn strings we can harvest, whether we go to Sefton. I'm not sure how populations are managing there at the moment, but the key to success is partnership buy-in, long-term commitment to management and monitoring. That is the key to success moving forward.
But the thing is that we are making progress, and again, if you look at the species, it is a species of ups and downs as well, isn't it? So you have to kind of mitigate that into the progress that you feel you're making. But what a fantastic success to get that species back on the north coast of Wales. I think it's fantastic. So
it's fantastic. I champion them because it's the rarest amphibian in Wales.
It's the rarest amphibian in the UK, apart from the bullfrog, I guess.
But no, it's my number one amphibian, common toad next. But no, it's fantastic. We've got them back here in Wales. Things are moving forward. We need to celebrate what we have achieved, and hopefully, with continued effort, achieve a lot more going forward.
Brilliant, well done, and look forward to hearing more about other sites then coming on stream as the project continues.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great stuff. No problem.
So I'm with Jack Harper, and Jack is the field officer for our reserves in the Weald. So Jack works for ARG. And Jack, you and I know each other quite well, but this is the first time that you've been to a Herp Workers Meeting, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, first time this year in North Wales, so I was very excited to come, and it's lived up to the expectations. It's been really good.
What have you got most from it?
I think there's just a variety of talks, and some of them are more general herpetology stuff, which is obviously to interested people that work in herpetology, but then also some really interesting studies that you can see the value for applied conservation in the work we do in the Weald, and particularly with adder stuff. And the general sense of community is pretty strong, and everyone's very friendly, so I really enjoyed meeting people, putting faces to names, and it's highly valuable, I think.
Yeah, that sense of community I think has really come across, and maybe for me it's heightened because we're coming back together after about 3 years. But so you've met. What would your impression be? There's a huge variety of people here from lots of different perspectives of conservation.
That's it. You've got consultants, you've got PhD students, master students, even undergrad students, and then people working on the ground. Conservation management, general herpetologists and academics. And it's just great to get different people's viewpoints, and obviously the general thread is that everyone has passion for herps and wanting to see them in a good status, but the knowledge base as a collective is just insane, and you can obviously learn so much so quickly from going to a 2-day event, and so many people that have given little insights at the talk today about the common frog and the colour changes as they age and things like that. It's just, I didn't know about that, and that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing insights, isn't it?
Yeah.
So your quick favourite for the so far?
My favourite. There's some really good grass snake talks. Particularly on creating the optimal egg-laying sites for grass snakes with Tarek, probably his second name, but Tarek, and then Steve's amazing grass snake talk and from his PhD work. It's amazing. I think favourite overall though was the adder telemetry study.
From Nigel Hand.
Yeah, and I think that was amazing, seeing how their movements differ between the sexes and between the sites, and whether hibernacular or how faithful those are hibernacular or not.
That was interesting.
Potentially the use of like brash piles or brash corridors as a way to, where there's very heavy disturbance with dog walkers, as a way to mitigate for that, because that's certainly something that a lot of people are talking about since lockdown, the increase of dog walkers on SSSI sites, or even lesser protected wildlife sites, and added disturbance, in particular basking reptile disturbance at key points in the year. So I thought that was really interesting, and certainly it's something that good to know for potential ARC work in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jack, and let's hope that you'll be able to come to many more of these.
I hope so, yeah. Looking forward to next year.
Nice one. Right, Nigel. I'm with Nigel Hand, who's just given his presentation about radio tracking adders, which is a fantastic update, Nigel, because you've presented at these gigs before, I know. There's a few takeaways for me that I wanted to just sort of discuss with you. One is the observations about following fence lines and the importance of fence lines and brambles and that sort of cover. And also the fact that, slightly unrelated to that, but that this concept of all adders always hibernate communally, dotted through the landscape. And the third thing was the impenetrable nature of things like coniferous woodland. Let's have a think about that sort of linear habitat lines that they follow, if you like.
I've found on some of the urban heathlands where they're under a lot of pressure from visitors and dogs off leads, we've got to think about future-proofing these animals to these issues. And I found, and it wasn't necessarily always radio-tagged adders, we've got an area where they cleared some conifer in 2014, and it's taken about 7 years for the adders to use this area, but they are hanging around along the fence lines, and they're using the fence lines and grass snakes, interestingly as well, as a corridor, and it's a secure corridor. It's the dogs. There is a pathway on the one side, and lower down there's another pathway off the slope from the fence, and the dogs don't seem to go up there. They avoid it, and we also got a screen of gorse and bramble, which in other areas can screen off people from these things. It's all about keeping people away from the adders, really. And that's the beauty of conservation now. And I think it's how we've got to think in the future. I talk to conservation managers, and they say, Nigel, it's not about managing the animals anymore. It's about managing the people and where they go.
That's a good point.
And I think that is so important now.
What about this idea of where they hibernate as well? Because we have got a little bit fixated on...
I think the old days of people talking about adders being in big numbers, emerging, sort of 7, 8, 9 adders on a communal hibernation. Yes, it still happens in places, but I've found with the telemetry, following them into winter quarters, they are spread around a site, and they're not necessarily all sat together. It's obviously an advantage, if anything did happen to that group, there's a proportion of the population lost. But if they're spread out, it's good for the population. But it makes trying to conserve them and look after sites more difficult.
It does, and just from casual observations, I've noticed that I've done early springtime walks just through a piece of heathland, and you do come across the odd adder, and you think, well, we're only in March or the end of February, and there's an adder sort of in the middle of nowhere, if you like.
And a couple of years back, we had a late winter, and we had some snow into March and April, and I actually watched an adder. I saw a male adder emerge, and it was still snow on the ground, and he moved straight away from his hibernaculum. He didn't stay there. I thought he'd stay there, but he went across the snow and carried on a bit further. Almost that drive to get to where a female was. He said, I want to be ahead of the game, so, and that's where he's gone,
And the other thing that you talked about, and again, it's slightly intuitive, because we often find adders along woodland rides in the forestry areas, but what you said about the fact that the vehicles that manage those sort of, even if they're managing scalloped edges, they're going to turn on that habitat. And it just shows how careful you've got to be to keep those areas clear.
And you saw in my talk that one male was within an area for about 70 odd days, a female 103 days in that area. She hadn't moved away. So that's the length of time they're sat there in the late part of the year, and that's generally around the time people do habitat management. And then the winter they'll do some mechanised cutting. So we're probably unaware of how many we've killed over time.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
Because you won't know that you've done it.
Yeah.
You'll drive over it and flatten it, compact the soil, and they're gone.
Yeah, so it's an illustration of just how careful you've got to be with that type of management. But it also opens your eyes to the fact that if you can make those passageways through blocks of forestry, it's a route for snakes to use.
And I totally agree. And I think forestry, we should be directing forestry to do more of this, because they will colonise areas where they're in quite close proximity. We've found that common lizards tend to be the first thing to appear on newly opened sites, and then you'll probably get a few adders following on. Sometimes, in some cases, it could probably be very quick, but in other areas where adder numbers are low, it may take a number of years, for the population to keep spreading. And we've got to future-proof them by doing that, by creating these little spaces through places and then connecting the groups, because I feel that we're getting to a stage now where they're less likely to be able to manage to do it.
Exactly. And the other thing that you can do with some of that management is to kind of disguise reptile management as butterfly management.
Or for the species.
Which is good in its own right, but you can kill many birds with one stone by opening up those colours. Fantastic talk, Nigel.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciated it, and it's just so great to see that work continuing and learning year on year.
I love this work, Howard. You're on site and you're almost thinking like an adder. You're following them, and I think you learn so much more than just going around lifting a tin.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
It's a great way of picking up on understanding the animal. And another bizarre thing that I say to people, and they never believe me, is that you can actually smell them on site. And I don't know if you know this, but they have a very distinct smell.
Yeah.
And I've smelt them on routes where they've actually gone through. I was out doing some habitat work last week, and I could smell adders on the site. So they've left a mark where they're hibernating. Mainly females that give off a pheromone to attract the males, but I've had males musk me as well, sometimes when I pick them up and you can smell, and the gloves, when we're catching them to put tags on, the gloves will smell of adders,
That's amazing.
But we've lost all that, haven't we, really? Because as humans, we've probably used our senses a lot more in the past, and think when you're doing this intensively, you pick up on it.
You start to learn, Great stuff.
All right,
nice to talk to you. Cheers.
See you again. Watch you
See
go.
you soon. Cheers. So I'm with Rachel Cooper-Bohannon, who is ARC's Project Officer for Scotland. And Rachel, I just wanted to have a quick chat with you. You just chaired a session at your very first Herp Workers Meeting, which is fantastic. And we were chatting over lunch, and you've worked for other conservation organisations, so you've been part of other communities for other species groups. I just wanted to get your impression of this community, because it's actually quite a surprisingly big community, and I just wanted to get your impression of what you felt about your first Herp Workers Meeting.
Yeah, it's actually been a really positive experience. I think the herp community is very friendly anyway, and I think, so certainly I work for ARC and it's been really welcoming, but it's a really nice mix of actually amphibian and reptile groups, researchers, a wide selection of talks covering genetics to climate change, to kind of radio tracking. So it's been really interesting.
So it's good to see the talks and the networking. How have you found that?
Really nice. I think it's been really good having there's quite a lot of coffee breaks and actually having the kind of dinner, but also quite a lot of times to kind of connect with other people and also during the gala dinner having the fun quizzes and that. So it's been quite nice because there's quite a lot of people have been new and I've just seen everybody just blended in and everybody's been very included. So it's been nice to see.
And in terms of your project, have you been able to sort of connect with other people in Scotland that perhaps you didn't know before, or did you know most of the community? I mean, it's a long way from Scotland, where we sit now in North Wales, but just wondered if there's any other folk that you've met that are going to be useful for your project.
So I've met actually somebody who's very new to herp working, who's just actually given a talk in my sessions. Was the only speaker from Scotland, actually, which has been brilliant. And so that's been great, and I've had quite a lot of support from people who are quite established in Scotland as well. When I started, I introduced myself, but it's been quite nice. I've actually met people face to face here, which has been really great.
That's good.
But also getting ideas from England and Wales, to be honest, and thinking what we can actually, take some of those great ideas and do them in Scotland. And quite a lot of people who are doing work in other countries are quite keen to come up and support us in Scotland, which is really awesome too.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic. Well, look, I wish you luck, and I'm sure that we're going to see each other at plenty more Herp Workers meetings in the future.
Thank you very much, Howard.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm with Rick Anstice, who is the secretary, former chairman of the Surrey Amphibian and Reptile Group. Rick, is that right?
It is indeed, Howard. Hi.
Hi, and you and I have been coming to these events for a number of years, haven't we? And what I wanted to do was just, I've been talking to some of the people that have been, this is the first one that they've come to, and I just wanted to contrast that with somebody that's seen decades of these events, and just get a sense from you about, your feelings about the event, and also where you see this community going, and what it looks like in the future.
Sure, thanks, Howard. Terrifyingly enough, I think it's 25 plus years, and probably 10 or a dozen that I've been to in all the home nations.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. There's some things that remain really good about any get-together of this nature for what is essentially a niche interest for many people, and the sheer level of enthusiasm, the numbers involved, the sense of shared purpose has carried right through for all those decades. I think there's been a shift from interested amateurs and academics to perhaps more of the professionals, the ecologists, the people who make their living from surveying. So I think that proportion's probably shifted a bit. But there's still all those three groups really well represented. And I think keeping the title of Herpetological Workers Meeting is a very clever idea, because
that's an interesting point.
It allows the wannabe, the experienced, the just a bit interested. And if there's one message that I've always had to say to lay interested toad crossing wardens and those sort of people is, this is not a purely professional, business-like, academically vetted event. It is a lot of fun, and you will find interactions with people exactly like you. Don't think you're going to be tested or evaluated in any way.
That's a good point.
And that remains as true as it ever was. And how fabulous to see so many people here for their first one.
Absolutely,
especially after the gap of COVID, and the virtual ones, valid attempts that they were, like so many things that were moved swiftly onto a virtual platform, just inevitably lose a lot of the interactive fun elements of it. And they have always been fun. The evening events, the socialising, have always been a really important part of it. And it's fun for me seeing people who I remember as slightly embarrassed, geeky teenagers coming to their first ones, and now they've got their PhDs. These are doctors in their subject, and they're lecturers.
Absolutely.
And they themselves are now teaching other people. So there's been a fabulous continuum of individuals through that. And of course, sadly, we've lost a few amazing characters and great personalities.
That is true.
I see them being replaced. I think
there's people coming up. But on a slightly more sort of serious and animal-focused perspective, you and I both know we face some very significant challenges, and this is the other thing. We've all been having conversations about the changes in our observations over the decades that we've been doing this stuff. So we have got some really serious challenges that we face. This community is the only community that is going to do something about that. So what are your sort of thoughts about how it develops in the future, and how we come together and try and share in the intelligence everybody's gathering and the knowledge that people are gathering, and take this whole initiative forward?
Very good. Yeah, it's a wonderfully diverse community of people in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, in a way that my other hobby, model railways, just isn't.
Okay.
But this has always been a showcase for technology and shifting and new ideas, and this one these last 2 days, no exception. The new ways of online recording, the new uses of electronic DNA, the price drops of eDNA analysis. So new techniques literally being showcased to a really good audience. But a real cohesive sense of climate change is a real thing. We don't have to debate that anymore. A few years ago we probably were. That, as you rightly say, there aren't many communities of professional practice meeting academics with that sense of we can and must do something about this. And of course there are horror stories, and there always have been, but there's also been quite optimistic ones. There's a presentation coming on this afternoon about a new local amphibian and reptile group starting up, and we've always had a mixture of real worrying, difficult stuff from the zoologists and from the environmentalists and from the ecologists, sort of leavened a bit with positive stuff from the researchers, the amateurs, the keen enthusiasts. But we all know that the situation is bad. In the duration of these meetings, we've seen real standout species like the golden toad go extinct.
Absolutely.
And we can't forget that. And there's been mentions of the new snake diseases that are emerging.
Snake fungal disease,
And very often these meetings have been the place that I've first heard about those threats. And that again remains true. That literally happened yesterday. So it's a mixture of news, old stuff, quite a lot of worrying negative stuff, but also a sort of positive sense of if anyone can do anything about it,
this community can.
Yeah.
Well, look, let's hope that these things continue in the vein that they have been doing, and I've got every faith that they will. And it's organisations like yours and the other county amphibian and reptile groups and the whole community coming together that's going to take it forward. So
absolutely true. And our strength is in that, a shared a sense of common purpose at national level, local level, and right down to individual road toad crossing level.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Great, nice to talk to you, Rick. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Howard.
Cheers. So I'm with Rob Gandler from the Herpetological Society of Ireland. Rob, great to see you, and I know you've been coming to quite a lot of these gigs over the years, and I just wanted to get your impression of what you've seen over the last couple of days and what you're going to take away from this meeting.
Thanks, Howard. It's always great to be at these herp workers meetings, and for me personally, I've been coming to them for this is my 8th one now. Time gets away from you quickly. And it's absolutely crucial. If you want to work with reptiles and amphibians in Ireland or the UK, you need to be at these meetings. You need to be learning from other people, talking to land managers. And this is particularly what I love. And I say to people who have never been, it's the only meeting I've been to where you'd be standing beside a professor from a uni, and the guy he's chatting to is the fella that drives the digger, talking about land management, and everybody's super welcoming, and you can just learn so much. It's not just the academic side of things, it's the practical side of things, and the variety is incredible, and every year there's always a good mix. There's the workshops as well. It's in terms of euro for euro spend, you couldn't get this anywhere else for the price that we get it for.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's such a good meeting. And we meet people like you who've written the books, who are still encouraging people, making people enthusiastic about wildlife because they have something small that they can carry around in the backpack. Even if herps aren't their thing, they might just have it with them because if flowers are your thing and you're out in the countryside, you're going to run across a herp at some stage. If you're out in spring, you'll see frogs moving, you'll see the newts moving, you could see lizards out basking, and it's just something nice to have. Always makes people enthusiastic about the natural world around them, and it's great. And that's exactly what this does. This makes it kind of revs you up. It makes you enthusiastic about what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's too easy to throw your hands in the air, throw in the towel and go, everything's terrible, the world's awful, the habitat's destroyed.
But this makes it more positive.
And this is absolutely more positive, and it's everybody. It's undergrads doing research, it's the NGOs doing the research, it's community groups showing how they do things, and we can learn from everyone. It's not just...
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like learning from everyone. And I like what you say about the fact that, you've got such a variety of people here. It's not just...
it's not just the sort of the hobbyists, if you like, and it's not just the conservation managers. It's everybody in this community together.
Yeah, and like yourself, and then it's down to like the bigger charities and groups here who they get into the political arena, and you can go, look, we can see this coming from our country. We know it's a different jurisdiction, but how have you navigated this? Just like for our own professional opinion, because everything goes to public consultation now. To take part, like, how do I make an informed decision before I make my consultations? Like, speak to the guys who are advising their own governments on how they go about it. It can be as technical as you want it to be when you come to these meetings.
But then you can get the practical advice.
But then you can have the great crack and and then you get the practical advice of the guys who are managing the habitat themselves. These are like your coalface on-site workers who they have so much to give. When it comes to like, this is how we've gotten rid of rhododendron, sea buckthorn, what have you, anything, parrot's feather, all these new aquatic things that are going to go bananas with climate change.
It's an important point.
It's so good, and the mix, like, that's what I love about it. It's the mix of people.
Me too.
We all understand that this is the venue, this is the atmosphere, and like, you can feel everybody's in a great mood, and we have the crack.
We have the crack as well.
We have our have I got news for you? We have our big table quiz. It's a really welcoming, good, fun atmosphere. Over the well, it's nearly 3 days because most people arrive on a Friday.
Exactly.
So it's brilliant. And I don't know any other meeting in Europe that is the same, or you can get so much out of it, in a relatively short period of time. Everybody should be here. Like this should easily be 200-300 people strong. That's what I visit. It's great.
It's good. I must admit I enjoy it as well. So lovely, and it's nice to see you again, and let's hope we keep seeing each other at these things.
Absolutely. I'm going to keep coming back, as long as they keep letting me in.
Excellent. Nice to talk to you, Rob.
Thanks very much, Howard.
Cheers.
So there you have it, our roundup interviews from the 2023 Herpetofauna Workers Meeting. Before I finish, I just wanted to thank our sponsors, Nature Space Partnership for being a gold sponsor, and Sistra also for being a gold sponsor. And the silver sponsors were the Natural History Bookshop and Ecola Limited. So thank you very much to the sponsors. And thank you as well to the speakers. What a lot of work went into preparing those presentations, and they were excellent. They really were good this year. So very, very engaging. Thank you very much. And also thank you to the delegates. A lot of people travel quite a way to get to North Wales, which is a fantastic location. So you missed out if you didn't come. So thank you very much to the delegates. And everybody, keep your eye out for the next Herpetofauna Workers Meeting. The invitations to that will go out probably around about just before Christmas next year, because we intend to run it at roughly the same time next year. And I look forward to seeing you there.